All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Young Old Heads podcast, where we try to bring a new generation's perspective to an old hobby. And I'm here again. My name is Tommy. I'm here with my good friend Max, Cards Max. Max, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It is Saturday, June 18th, and we have a lot going on today.
Yeah, we got a lot going on, including our third guest ever on the podcast and making his debut in card audio content. The legend, absolute legend, if you follow him on Instagram or if you know him in general, Kimball at Sunsport Trading. Kimball, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate coming on here. I'm a little nervous, but I'm really excited to talk about some stuff with you guys.
Hey, I know me and Max are like really intimidating guys.
Yeah, the most intimidating.
I know we got that from before the show.
For sure. Well, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast today. You're a guy, we met each other on Instagram. We kind of had some mutual friends from college and growing up, and you reached out and we started talking, and I started following you, and I was like, holy shit, this guy knows his stuff, and I think he's a perfect guy to have on the podcast with me and Max as a kind of a guy our age in the collecting, but also in a very niche world where you're kind of building your own. As we talked about before, you're a non-sport influencer, but also a sport influencer. You're an influencer, Kimball. Kimball, can you tell us a little bit about your collection, who you are?
I really appreciate all that, and an influencer is the farthest thing from what I try to be, so that's a little bit of an insult. But I started collecting really when I was about 10, 9 or something like that. I went to high school in New York City. I was in middle school, elementary school at the time in New York City. And there's a card shop right across the street from the school. And I was a huge Patriots fan. The Patriots were really killing it then. And I just wanted to open the football packs and get Brady cards, game used cards, like all that type of stuff. I never knew even at the time about grading or anything like that. But I was pretty into it for like 3 or 4 years. And, once a year, I would say, throughout high school, throughout college, I would like look through my binder of a ton of stuff. And I had decent stuff, like I had some Brady game worn patch, some, Topps Chrome Brady Gold from a while ago that like was banged up but decent and stuff like that. Worth not that much, obviously, in like 2010 or 2011, which was the draft classes I was like in love with. And then during COVID, it's similar to a lot of people during the summer of 2020, late summer 2020, I just started seeing a lot of stuff on Instagram about like really, really big sales in basketball, and the NBA finals I remember was happening towards the end of that summer, and people were kind of going, and The Last Dance was happening, that the Jordan documentary. And so there was a lot of buzz around the industry, and I kind of thought like, let me kind of look through my old stuff and see what they're worth today. And it was, as I told you, once a year I'd gone through it and looked through some of the stuff online, but I saw just a huge jump at that point. And like there were these basketball and football cards I had collected that were just like 20 times more valuable than what I ever thought. So I kind of, at that time, I needed some money, and I just started selling them on eBay. I made a little bit of an Instagram. I was like Kimball's Cards originally, and I really got into it then. And then, I really started to think about alternative sports and ways to, make a lot of profit in this industry if there's some big swings.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here, Kimball. Me and you have similar stories of how we started collecting, but I think the way that you immediately went to, hey, the market seems to be booming, I'm going to see where my lane is, I think is really interesting. So can you tell us like what was your first thought? What was your first thought of like, all right, I'm going to see how I can make this sort of big money that I'm seeing in these sales? How did you go from, I'm going to sell some of my childhood cards on eBay, to this, I'm going to see how I can make some significant money doing this?
So I think I kind of went from like, the Zion Prism and the Jaw cards were super hype, but this was the fall of 2020. So stuff was going up like pretty rapidly. And like even these oversaturated base cards were like kind of skyrocketing in value and everything. So I kind of started with that, of like just getting some prospects like Darius Garland or Zion, or I always wanted like Zion cards at the time. I thought he was going to be the greatest player ever. And I kind of began to understand the supply and demand game that happened with those, but I didn't see tremendous profit in those types of cards. Yes, those cards are really liquid and common, like John Morant cards and whatever different RPAs of them. And I think that translated to me saying, okay, like what's going to be like the next big thing? Like clearly basketball was like the thing for the end of the year 2020 and beginning of 2021, obviously, like more so than any other sport. Everything went up, but more so than any sport.
Yeah.
And that's when I went into soccer, and I really thought that it's the biggest global sport. There's lots of emphasis to grow it in America. There's World Cup coming up. There's a lot less scarcity. There's a lot more scarcity when it comes to the products released, the cards released, when modern and vintage. And it just seemed like a no-brainer. So that's kind of my first thought process of how I went in there. And then,
Yeah, for sure. Max's has kind of I think a similar thought process in terms of you guys both, when the market was booming, Max before the market even started booming, but we're both trying to make, figuring out what is going to be what I'm going to make money on, what can I submit for grading, what has low pop, what is going to be what people want. Max, did you have the same thought? I mean, you started out more in the Pokemon and baseball, and I know you've kind of branched out into F1 and soccer. Is that a similar thought that you had? Like, what is the next thing that's going to pop? What's the next thing I'm going to be able to make money on?
I mean, I try not to look at it from a frame of what can I make money on and how can I maximize profit. We've definitely seen, I guess, with F1 as an example, that whatever is happening into the card news with licensing and new products coming out, it can permeate into genuine fandom. Although I will say my interest in F1 is definitely much more infantile than some people who have been following for years and are a lot more cultured regarding it. But, I see race cars, I see them making cards of it. I get into it a little bit. I'm like, okay, cool. Then, okay, if people are buying and selling, then how can I implement this into my card strategy? But I just to clarify, I don't try to get into things saying, oh, how can I be a big capitalist on this? More so it stems genuinely from the enjoyment or just from the production of new cards.
And yeah, I think that's, and one of the reasons why Kimball is on the podcast is because he is a true collector of cards. He's an appreciator of the history and the art behind some of these really old vintage sets, but also, you have Kimball, you have some of the dopest red refractors that I've seen out there on the market. So, when you were looking at these markets and thinking about it, how much of what you personally are passionate about and interested in, how much of that impacts what you want to buy?
I think it's imperative when I buy anything genuinely that I'd be interested in it, and I love it. I mean, I think if I was really purely thinking about money, I know I don't collect really football at all. I follow football a lot. I just don't know a lot about the market and stuff. And I know there's some pretty crazy swings with quarterbacks and, getting young RPAs that can go up a lot. And for baseball, a lot of, obviously one of the most common things in the hobby is getting, prospect cards and watching that type of player grow. And I like baseball, but I'm not really that interested in it. So, I mean, I think everything I collect and everything I buy, I say, I love this card. And I also think this card is undervalued, or I think that this card's going to go up. Or sometimes I really don't, and I don't really spend that much money on it if it's like something totally, totally personal that I buy all the time.
Yeah, so you'll never be spending significant money on a card that you purely think is going to go up in value. You have to have some sort of personal reason behind wanting the card, or some sort of aesthetic thing.
Sort of personal interest, absolutely. I've never gotten a prospect on a team that I don't know. Just researching the prospect, I'll get a prospect on the team that I like, and if it pans out, so be it. I think really where the profits come from was I really started to buy vintage soccer, I've loved soccer my whole life. I'm a huge fan, and I saw vintage was really undervalued at the beginning. And I remember buying these raw cards for, $30, $40, $50 I did so many, bulk PSA orders that ended up being $500, $600, $700 cards just as the market matured over a year. So I think that, and then as I moved into F1, has been more my profit area, but I still love that more than anyone. I'm a diehard F1 fan. I'm a diehard soccer fan. So
I totally get that. I personally, what I've been telling a lot of people with this recent Warriors championship, go Dubs, is I am incredibly lucky with the fact that I started getting back into collecting at the absolute low point of the Warriors in the last 10 years. They were the worst team in the NBA when I started collecting again, and being able to buy those cards, these Steph Curry rookie cards, these Clay, all this game worn stuff, and cards that, there weren't that many of them on eBay because people weren't listing them when they were that bad. But the ones that did pop up, and me, not even really knowing it was the best time to be buying them, but just buying them and getting back into it, I'm just incredibly lucky. And I think, as smart as you are, Kimball, I think your just interest aligned with markets that were going to started booming. And I think obviously a lot of it was you knowing like history and low pop and understanding supply and demand, but a lot of it also, is luck. And
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it was super lucky. I think F1 has been a more interesting wave because there's been more ebbs and flows to it. I think with soccer, you're exactly right. It was like the perfect time in that fall. All the attention was kind of towards the other sports. Soccer had a moment in the summer of 2020. There was Mbappe base cards went up a lot, and there was a lot of, quick hype and a lot of crashing right after. But I think, yeah, with soccer, I wouldn't have been able to go into F1 had I not gone into soccer. Mostly out of most of my soccer cards besides some personal collection stuff. But yeah, very lucky on that end.
For sure. And Max, what are your thoughts, Max, on that? First of all, you were in the market for a long time before. Were you buying soccer cards, Max, before 2020 at all? Were you in that at all?
I was not.
You were strictly baseball and Pokemon?
I'd say the Pokemon just stemmed more recently, I'd say in 2021, partly during the standing outside Target, scalping for boxes that were easily arbitrageable, but definitely rekindling the childhood interest I had when I was ripping packs when I was 8 years old or so. I started buying soccer again, kind of as a byproduct of cards getting hot. I don't watch too much soccer, but I can enjoy Haaland and Messi and Ronaldo's talent.
Yeah, for sure. I think anyone who knows sports respects them.
I will add, I think I know as I've become more ingrained with the card community on different forms of social media, which is obviously so vibrant and connected, there's a lot of, you can say, yeah, I went in at a good time, but I know a lot of people that were really bullish on these cards and buying tons and tons and tons of inventory of Messi, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Pele, these key cards in 2011, 2012, 2013. I think those types of people, what I was buying at was 10, 20 times to what they were buying at. So, you could always say that somebody's luckier than the next. I think that it fell in the right place, but I definitely think, I have had to enter the market in a very hot time for it.
I totally get that. Something that what you just said reminded me is just part of the game of being a person on social media and collecting cards and being on the internet for it is figuring out who you should be listening to, who you should be talking to, who's actually knows what they're talking about, but also finding people that align with how you think about things and, being wow, that's me and you, Kimball, have a lot of times where you'll say something and I'm wow, I've had this thought before, exact thought. And I didn't even really know that other people were thinking that, but now I'm oh, well, what's the other thing? What's going to be the next thing that we're talking about? I'm going to bring up a name real quick for you, Kimball. Senna, your man. Can you tell us your journey with Senna cards? It's taken 13 minutes for us to talk about him, so I need you to do a quick explanation of how you started with this, what your first Senna card was, who he is for the ignorant listeners.
So I'll start with kind of my F1 interest. I'm not some long-term F1 fan like a lot of people. I watched Drive to Survive, the Netflix show, at the beginning of last summer, and I just fell in love with the sport. And then it quickly aligned with oh, I see a lot of value here. So I started collecting, a lot of modern wax, a lot of modern cards of F1, but I really didn't dive into the vintage thing. And what I was thinking about with my journey with collecting soccer was I made a far better profit on my vintage cards as modern collectors, I believe, trickle into the vintage area over time and generally every kind of category. And, this is the fall of 2021. There was a card that was listed on eBay for about a year for about 17,000. It was listed on eBay for, or best offer. It was a SGC7 Senna rookie, which is, if anybody's seen the Senna rookie, it's a clear, weird test market card that's extremely, extremely scarce and extremely condition sensitive. This was Pop 1 with none graded higher. I think at the time there were 18 graded by SGC in total. PSA or BGS didn't grade it. And I had been eyeing the card for a while, and nobody was biting on it. My friend who collects with me kind of pointed out, yo, would you split this with me? This is really crazy. I looked up who this guy Senna is. He seems like the greatest driver ever. His story in which he was killed tragically, while being the most aggressive driver in the history of Formula One and definitely the most vibrant personality, like it was just a fantastic story for the greatest card of all time of the greatest driver of all time. So I bought that card. I kind of kicked my friend out of the deal, and I was like, okay. I offered him, I think, $14,000, and I bought it for that. And that was the biggest card I'd ever purchased at the time by far. And sure enough, 2 days later, 2 more Sennas got listed. I had never seen another one on the market before then, and 2 more got listed. I think it was a SGC3 and an SGC 4.5 in response to the sale of the SGC 7. And, I kind of had the idea of like, what if I see so much value in Senna as he's cheaper than Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen cards, and this guy's the greatest driver of all time. And he has so much of a loyal following around the world. Let me just be as aggressive as I can, buying every single one of his cards from every single year in all the highest grades I can possibly do, and just focus my collection on that. And, I watched the Senna documentary. I really learned more about him as like a human being and like how charitable he was and how he gave up his fortune to kids in Brazil and just how he was, such a legendary, amazing person in the history of Formula One and to the country of Brazil. I have a few Brazilian friends and I've talked to them about it afterwards, and they're like, he literally is like the biggest hero in the history of Brazil.
Yeah.
Brazil was having a hard time economically, and he was wearing Brazil with pride at every single race, and he was just the biggest national hero. So for those reasons, I saw it as an excellent investment. It was so fun collecting his cards, as I liked. They were some of the same issues as 80s vintage soccer cards, and I knew how to collect them. And ever since then, now I have such a large inventory of Senna, and I rarely sell anything, but I'm always on the hunt for more.
Yeah. And real quick, I think, I'm going to let Max do a quick bit about how he watched the Senna documentary after this, but for the people back home, we've missed an important aspect or important part of your story, I think, which is another aspect of luck, which is a card that you hit out of a box, which I feel like kind of spurred your bigger purchases down the line. Do you want to tell people about that?
This is a very, very funny story, and one that I ponder about a lot if it was the right decision almost every day. For Christmas of 2020, I sent my family a link on DA Card World to a 2019-2020 Topps Chrome UEFA soccer box, which had Haaland and Fati rookies in it. The Haaland auto doesn't come in any variations. It's just a silver auto. There's no superfractor. There's no red. There's no orange. It's just that. It's super short print. I think it's like Pop 4. When I got it, it was Pop 1. But it was Pop 4 in a PSA 10, I think now. Shows you how short printed it is. So I got the box, I think the box was like 600, 700 or something at the time. And first pack, I hit the Haaland auto, which is like beyond a case hit. That's like the product hit you can hit. I think it's likely printed to less than 25.
Yeah.
It was the most valuable card I ever had my hands on at the time. I was like, holy shit, this is insane.
Yep.
I didn't really understand the value, but I sent it right to PSA, graded, gemmed instantly. And, I was eyeing a complete set of 1973 Panini OK VIP, which I believe is one of the most important non-sport sets of all time. It features politicians, it features musicians, actors, it features athletes, it features painters, writers. It's such a complex set with such beautiful art, and I encourage anybody listening to take a look at it. 1973 Panini OK VIP. And so this guy had a complete setup, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to sell the card in order to buy that set because I didn't have the cash to buy both. And the Haaland card sold to a friend on Instagram. He PayPal me the money. It was a really quick transaction. And I bought a few more non-sport cards, and that really sparked my love for non-sport. I really started to go in and say, okay, hold on a minute here. Somebody like Darius Garland or John Moran is not going to be remembered in 50 years and 40 years, as I'm looking at my cards right now, like, as John Lennon or,
Yep.
FDR or Teddy Roosevelt or the Beatles or James Dean or just these legendary figures. And I really started to kind of go into them and say, what is the rookie card for a celebrity, for a personality. And I just, I couldn't feel more strong about any section of the market as I do there long term. I think the last thing I'll say is I think, modern non-sport cards, the Jay-Z Topps cards, the Obama Topps cards, there's money there and there's interest there. And I think just as it's done in every other sport, I think that's going to trickle down back in time more. And so that's how I started my real love for non-sport.
Yeah.
And
I also think that, I wanted the people to get a little background on how you kind of started getting into this kind of buying bigger cards. Because I think something me and Max talk about a lot is how we had to build up our trust in ourselves to buy bigger cards and more spend more money being yo, I know I'm never going to see this card again. I need to trust myself here. This is something that I should see as opportunity. That's something that, we kind of lucked into it maybe with the Senna, the first one, didn't know totally the background on how many would pop up. You didn't know exactly what was going to happen after you bought that one. But I need Max's opinion here. Max, you watched the Senna movie last night. Can you tell us why Senna is someone that you feel after watching that is someone that the hobby would love?
I think it's interesting that you phrased the question how the hobby would love him, because the hobby usually loves polarization, and Senna seems to be the farthest thing from it. He's a nationally adored and acclaimed F1 driver who, I don't want to look at personal philosophy, but seems to be very stoic and family oriented. I was watching, the documentary last night, and that you could just see a ton of pride on his sleeve as a very little controversy figure who was simply chasing greatness at near all costs.
Yeah, I think it's a good case study of what makes someone a prime person for the hobby to love. And that's something, Kimball, I think you think about when you're thinking about who's this greatest, the Tesla rookie. He's in pop culture as a name. Maybe if Tesla, the company, didn't exist, you wouldn't be buying those rookie cards. They wouldn't be going for as much. But you're thinking about what is culturally relevant, what will stay culturally relevant going forward, and what are cards that kind of amplify that. I think something, just a quick comparison across, you wouldn't, there's certain cards that exist that no one would think would be worth that much, but they are because they're particularly culturally relevant. In basketball, the first thing that's coming to my mind is the 2008 Topps set with LeBron doing his chalk toss, guarding Kobe in his card. Those are cards that are culturally relevant, not just because it's a 2008 fifth year vet base card of LeBron. It's because of the picture. It's because of what that image represents in people's minds about LeBron. And I think that crosses over for many athletes, and something that you talk about a lot with your Senna cards, because you buy up all of them. You're not just buying rookie Sennas. You're buying cards that come up randomly. Can you talk about maybe one or two Senna cards that you've bought that maybe you didn't, wouldn't be the most valuable, but you think are the coolest?
Yeah. So I will respond to Max real quick about the controversy part. I did want to say is, although he was and is now a very non-controversial figure, I view that because of his death, really. When he was a driver, it was kind of Europeans versus South Americans. He had a rivalry with somebody named Alain Prost, and Senna was constantly under criticism for being too aggressive of a driver and having too big of an attitude during his career. And it's interesting, obviously, I think the narrative has changed over time. People being oh, was so beloved, and he is so beloved now. But I do think at the time that there was so much fire in him, and that does provide some to his allure, and it really grew Formula One, that rivalry. So I just wanted to add that part. But I think I try to at least buy one of every Senna card that I've ever seen exist. Generally, I have multiple of a lot of them. But
that is such a collector thing to say. I love it.
There's a 1994 Portuguese sticker that is generally regarded as his last card during his career. And it's pictured him wearing this hat actually about 3 or 4 weeks before his death. And it's a set that isn't graded by anybody, but it's well known among hardcore F1 collectors. And, I got it for $60 and I really, really love that card. I look at it all the time, and, I'm working with PSA to grade it, and I would never sell it. It's, something I love. I also think I have these rare discs from 1984, which I obviously am bullish on it in the long term, but they're not graded by anybody, and they're, these very unique little caricatures of his helmet and stuff like that. So, you know, I could, the list could go on and on of the type of random Senna cards like I want. You know, if I see one I don't have, I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna get it in the highest grade possible. I think that there's more desired ones than next. The 1986 Super Sport and the 1987 Super Sport have proved to be like key cards with a lot of money behind them. And so I, you know, will pick up 10, 15, 20 copies of each or something like that. But, you know, for the rest, I love them all.
Yeah.
Is there a PSA set registry of Senna cards where you can see all their super collectors and just how amassed some people's stashes are?
I've been thinking about getting on the registry. I haven't really messed around with it too much, to be honest. A lot of them are graded with SGC because PSA have their heads up their butts when it comes to vintage F1. They like just started grading the Senna rookie like 3 months ago. They've done all this super disorganized stuff. So a lot of my vintage F1 is in SGC, which I actually trust more for that type of thing. But I do want to set it up. I don't think there's any question though that I have probably 70% of the pop of generally every Senna card of every single year that's graded by PSA.
Yeah, can you talk more about your communication with PSA? I think that's something that a lot of people would find super interesting, like how you maybe talk about also bearing the lead here. Kimmel might be a little humble here, but he literally has he has the best vintage F1, if not just F1 in general collection, probably in the world.
There's some guys that have some way more valuable like modern F1 collections with these dynasty and stuff like that. But I definitely think I've put in the effort to, you know, consolidate all the key F1 cards. There's a few things I'm missing, but, you know, a large inventory of all the key cards wherever I can.
Can you talk about the specific card you know to be what you consider the best F1 card, if not, you know, the holy grail of vintage F1, the one that you talked with PSA about, and talk about that communication back and forth with PSA and how you disagree with the final grade on it?
Oh, yes. Okay. Wait, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I won an auction for, it was a no-brainer auction. It was a Senna So the Senna rookie, if anybody has seen it, comes in a few variations. It comes in a car variation and it comes in a portrait variation. As common in even modern F1 sets, the portrait's really the desired card. And I think with Senna, he has such a bright portrait that people love on it, and it's obviously one of the most important cards. It comes with a perforated edge because they're traditionally attached to another card. And as I've done my research, there's either two variations. For Senna, for example, it's Patrick Tambay and Elio De Angelis on the panel. And for the car variation, it can either come in Derek Warwick with Senna and his car, or, which I did not know existed, Alain Prost. And if for anybody who knows F1, Alain Prost was Senna's greatest rival. And they went toe-to-toe as teammates. They have a long history together. And it's pretty much a dual rookie card of the two of them. So I saw this auction from an Italian seller for selling both of them raw. He was holding them with his bare hands, no top loader, no anything.
Yep.
And I bid a lot more than I paid. And I ended up winning it for, I think, about $17,000 or $18,000, which was a steal, I thought, because of the way these prices of these cards were going for. And it was the only known Prost and Senna card together that's ever been seen. And so it came with both of them. They came here. I looked at them. The portrait panel, the dual portraits, was in really good condition, you know, one of the best I've seen. But the Senna and Prost card was in the finest condition of any 1984 card I have ever seen. I've dealt with like over 20 or 30 cards, different cards of 1984, and this one was just flawless. It's a plastic card that has inherent scratches. There were no scratches. It literally looked like a piece of glass. It was so perfect. And I sent them both in, and I got a PSA 7 on the dual panel, and I got a PSA 6 on the Senna Prost, which was shocking to me because when you had them side by side, it's obvious that the Senna and Prost was better condition than anything I've ever seen. And I actually just picked up a PSA 8 of the other variation of the cars, and I put them side by side next to each other, and you can just see it's not even close. That Senna Prost deserves a PSA 9 or 10 for sure. So I went at PSA just emailing them like crazy about it, because I mean, although I was disappointed. It was an amazing grade with the PSA 6 for that card. I just felt like it made no sense, and that goes along with how PSA doesn't really know what they're doing in terms of vintage F1 cards. If that's just what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because this is one of those cases where you have dove so deep into the F1 vintage world that you are more knowledgeable on what is a good condition vintage F1 card than PSA, which is like really saying something about like the legitimacy behind grading companies, I think. And like a lot of people think that PSA is out here hiring experts in all these fields, but really they rely on their submitters to provide information on the cards they're submitting a lot more than I think people realize. And don't even really know what they're grading sometimes, like especially with a card as rare as that, as the Pro Senna card that you're talking about. Like that card literally does not exist really anywhere else. Like the fact that they're telling you that that's a PSA 6 when you are the one who knows all the different variations and what they look like and what the conditions mean and what all across the board, you're much more of an expert on that. And I would trust a Kimball 8 on that card a lot more than I would trust a PSA 6.
Maybe I'll start my own grading company. Add to the list of trash graders.
Hey, well, Max will be your first grader.
But no, I mean, the last thing I'll say about that is I mean, there's so many. I work with PSA constantly, emailing them back and forth, and they really are frustrating to deal with on this front of getting them to. I have so much vintage F1 is so rare and hasn't been graded and hasn't been collected. This is really the very beginning of collecting vintage F1. Besides a very small community of people, so they don't grade all these cards. You know what I mean? So there's a 1984. It's called like a Collecao Chromos Senna rookie, which is a big, bold Senna card. That's a 1984 true rookie. A lot of people say they value it higher than the Panini, the rookie. I have a bunch of copies of it, and PSA just won't grade it. I have the full album. I could probably get SGC to grade it, but I'm going back and forth, getting them documentation, contacting the company back and forth. So, in terms of PSA vintage F1, I have most of my vintage F1 is raw because I just, these are sets that they're going to be graded over the next few years. I want to be one of the first people to get my cards there.
Yeah.
And, I work with them constantly on that. They're a pain in the ass, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think something that's like an underlying topic amongst all our conversations, and something that me and Max talk about all the time is just how hard it is to research cards online, and just like how little of a central, like there's no place to go to figure out, oh, these are all the Senna cards. You had to go online and figure it out. Max, you love talking about the PSA set registry, and I think that was, I love that you brought that up. Can you tell us like what, Max, why you love this PSA set registry real quick, and like kind of what information that gives a collector?
I definitely have a bit of admiration towards just seeing some cards slabbed, even if they are a PSA 8 or PSA 7 for ultra modern. It's definitely something that relative to this new generation of collectors is dying, but I think it is fun to see the competitiveness in different collectors in who has almost every single type of Charizard card graded or who has them all graded in a 10. And if you can categorize the ones that exist and the ones that have been graded by a company, which is a lot easier to do for more known players when more recent sets than it is for vintage F1 drivers, even just compiling a list of what are all of the cards that exist and who has the most of them is a fun way to compete, since really collecting is rooted in a little bit in showboating, a little bit in saying why something's cool, why something's interesting. And to have a leaderboard of who has the most of the cool and the interesting items is definitely something that is captivating.
I totally agree. And I definitely I've wanted to get everything on there, but I think the real problem with that and the way that I collect is I'm collecting so niche, like such a niche area of the industry that, the Panini Senna wasn't graded by PSA till December. That was the first. So if you looked at PSA, sometimes the way I look at cards, and one of like my initial searches, I was telling Tommy about this once, is, you go on PSA, you go to the pop report, then you go to player search, and you look up Katharine Hepburn, the actress, and you find the earliest cards of her ever made. With Senna, if you did that, it would tell you 1986 Super Sport, even though there are a lot of 1984 cards that exist for Senna that PSA yet doesn't know about. So, I definitely think that that's something to take in consideration, especially when you come to vintage F1. that was a real shock to me. I was like, there's not that information there, and the information can be misleading in the sense that it appears that the 1986 is the true rookie, and you're like, where in the world did this 1984 rookie card come from?
Yeah,
and even when we're talking about, Tommy and I have gone back and forth because I am a Nirvana fan, and one of my biggest gripes with non-sport is the production of players or cards just because it's marketable. Like Tiger King receiving cards is because of the big Netflix documentary and not cards from 2015. Tommy and I'm a Nirvana fan. We've specifically discussed when is the first Nirvana card, which to my understanding and personal research is 1994. But with the vast amount of 95, 96 releases and then American Pie, why would I want a card that's after he was a big deal, after the band was a big deal, and that after, Kurt Cobain dies? I'd rather get in on something, get in on the Kurt Cobain rookie card before he's a big deal and before he's a big thing, or as early as possible. But connecting this to Senna, not having a central database and having to do the grunt work and without even sometimes a certainty that it's correct is something that there's a little bit of extra legwork for the collector, but also sometimes has a little bit more significance as well.
Yeah,
it's also fun.
Yeah, wait, Kimmel, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's also fun. That's part of the
game.
Oh,
of course.
Yeah, that's Max always says, like, there's kind of a fluid line between a card being so niche and so obscure that like no one really would have like ever find out about it, and that makes it not as valuable, but also like how that also adds value on the other side, where if a card is so niche and cool and like has a cool story behind it, and you explain it to someone and then they immediately understand the significance and importance of it, there's kind of that kind of battle all the time in the card world, I think, because of like, yeah, you want to find the most obscure, oldest thing, but also, is anyone going to care about it? It's unclear. But as a collector, that is kind of up to your own discretion. As a Senna expert, you kind of can make those decisions for yourself and feel confident about it. But if someone's maybe just getting into collecting, just starting to look into the world of cards, that kind of delegitimizes the market and industry in some sense because of how hard it is to find information.
Absolutely. And I think, I think in non-sport, it's even more of a gray area, right? Because if you look at Formula One, or like, let's say Senna as an example, it's like, there's not going to be, he was a F1 driver and he was an F2 driver. He had a rookie season where he started his career. There's not going to be cards previous to that. With a actress or a singer or a world leader or something like that, like, you just don't know when the earliest card of theirs is going to be. Like, when did they get recognition? Linda Ronstadt is a 1970s musician who is one of my favorite musicians ever. And, I had thought her 1980 Panini Rock and Pop collection was like the earliest card. I look for cards all the time. And a friend of mine on Instagram recently informed me there's this 1978 Mexican issue card that's not graded by anybody. And that just happens all the time like that. You have no ideas. And you have to be careful. You have to be really careful of that. If you're like trying to put all your eggs in one basket in some vintage thing, even for soccer guys will know this, as 1958 Pele was the key rookie year, the key rookie card. Now there's, I think, 2 different cards that have surfaced from 1957 for the GOAT of soccer, And so that can happen, and it's really important to be careful there.
Yeah, and like, I think a lot of people take it for granted that we know the Honus Wagner is the holy grail of vintage baseball cards. Like, I think those sort of things, those sort of niche, rare things with stories behind it, like about how rare they are, not everyone even knows that they exist yet. A specific example, Kimball, that I really want you to talk about right now is you've gone kind of deep into the U.S. president world of collecting, and there's one holy grail U.S. president card that I'm not sure everyone really knows about. I know that the people really, really in the know about it, but I think the general public, the general average collector of baseball and normal like sports cards won't know that there's this holy grail U.S. president card out there. Can you tell us about that one?
So this card we're going to talk about, I definitely think it has had legs for over 2 decades. It's been valuable. It is such an important card, definitely the most valuable, most important non-sports card, rarest, and that's the 1932 Caramel Presidents, William McKinley. While McKinley doesn't seem like one of the biggest presidents ever, 1932 Caramel was a great set. A lot of people know for baseball stars. They had some golf players on it. They did a bunch of different types of stuff, but they did a presidential set that I'm actually working on completing right now. And it was a set of 31. And on the back of the card, it says, if you submit all 31 to the U.S. Caramel Company, we will return the package with like 2 pounds or 3 pounds of chocolate, just an absurd amount of chocolate. It's something that they couldn't afford based on the supply of cards they're putting out.
Yeah.
So they either made the McKinley, the 31st card, just the most random president, super, super short printed, or they never released it at all. I think there are 2 at PSA in all grades. I think there's 2 at SGC in all grades. And those are the only 4 that have surfaced. That card's been a 5-figure card, I think, for over 15 years now. It's, had a ton of legs for a long time. And, that type of scarcity, that type of story, robbing kids of their chocolate like that is, I think, what makes it. That's what makes the Honus Wagner so desirable. It's the story behind it of, how he didn't like smoking and he didn't want there. Were they ever actually distributed in packs? Did these come out of the factory? Where did they come from? And the McKinley, I think 1932 Caramel is one of the most important sets depicting presidents and world leaders ever, and really pioneered that. And to have a super, 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 super short print chase card, if you will, in the 1930s is just a fascinating concept. And I value that card. I mean, I would like to get one at one point, so it's probably not good gamesmanship for me to share, but I've kind of assumed that ship has sailed. But, I think that card is that's so tremendously undervalued.
Yeah, there is no ceiling for that card. That's the rare, that's like something where
than a Wagner. It's like 10 times rarer than a Wagner.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, but the fact that it is so rare, it is so obscure, and like there's so much mystery around it means that a lot of people don't even know it exists. And
and I think that's the type of stuff that I love. And I think rare non-sport cards like that, stories like that, it's just delightful.
Yeah, exactly. Max, you have any thoughts on that card? I know you don't, you're not a huge political, non-sport person, but just like hearing that, did you know about that card?
I did not know about that card or that story, and just hearing that story for the first time, the uniqueness and the allure of it is evident in the storytelling itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the perfect example of what you're talking about, Mac, what you like to talk about. Like the story adds value. And even though William McKinley, like not a super significant president in terms of the grand scheme of things, like imagine if that was an important president card, how much like would that be more valuable? But it is still, the story adds the value, which I think is.
Or even the aspect of, going on a very different connection here, but Alex Gordon's taken out of the circulation rookie card. Obviously, there was a lot of issues. Kimball, I don't know how much you know about this. I'm trying not to butcher.
I know the story.
Okay, so say it flawlessly.
So basically, Alex Gordon is this baseball player. He had a prospect. He was a big hype prospect, I think in 2005 or 6. 2005. So yeah, and that was right when the MLB made their like rookie card logo rules about how you can't have a rookie card unless you've played in a major league game or been called up. And Topps had already produced one for Alex Gordon, a rookie card, and they had to basically take it out of production. And there's various examples where one time there's one variation that's literally like there's a giant square missing in the middle of the card where like somehow it made it into packs. It's just a very niche card that like has a story behind it. I think you can find examples of that throughout the history of the hobby. There are examples of it, and I'm sure there are in soccer and other sports as well.
Alex Gordon is a good but not great player. I don't know if the Kansas City Royals will retire his number.
No,
they won't. You're calling it right there.
I know. Yeah.
Well, for sure. But regardless, he will be in, a well-regarded player in that area no matter what, but definitely not a nationally acclaimed player really, or someone who has a sniff of the Hall of Fame. But if that were, I don't mean to slander someone, but Steven Dugar on the Giants, who has his irrelevant,
slander him, please,
who has his rookie card just taken out of the production. The fact that it is Alex Gordon adds some significance to him because he wasn't a nobody; he was an all-star at some points.
Yeah,
but that also adds to the storytelling aspect. And I think with, of course, United States presidents, it's hard to find any of them that are truly insignificant, but some names are more marketable than others.
Of course. I mean, I think what's important to look at is what makes I'm sure there's other rare cards of early 1900 sets that are more rare than the Wagner, but the T206 set is one of the staple baseball sets. I don't even collect baseball, and I know that Ty Cobb and the Cy Young or whatever, these are huge. And I know that Eddie Plank is short printed as well, and that's what people chase all the time. But it needs to be a really important set. And I think the set you guys are talking about, I'm not really familiar with the full story, but I think even more value would be there if it's 1932 Caramel, which performs across all sports, non-sport, golf, baseball. I know the Babe Ruth does well on it. Stuff like that. It needs to be a very important set.
Yeah, and I think to do a quick jump, but is something that like as a collecting modern cards, it's hard to be forward thinking and like, oh, this set that was just released will be an iconic set in 30, 40 years. And I think in F1, there's a perfect example with last year, 2020 Topps Chrome, 2020 Topps Chrome. Yeah. People are like already declaring it this iconic set. But it's what are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
I mean, I think speaking specifically I think exactly you're right. I think these big key sets perform over time. Look at 2012 Prism, those Prism Golds of fucking any player go berserk. I think 2014 World Cup for soccer, you can kind of more liken to 2020 Topps Chrome for F1. There's a lot of hype behind 2020 Topps Chrome F1, a lot of which I think is totally unjustified, and that's the reason that I invest in vintage F1, because I feel like in comparison to that, it's undervalued. But no one can deny, F1 cards weren't really that scarce, that weren't really that heavily made. The next set before that people know about is 2006 Futera and 2005 Futera. There's like no F1 sets before 2020. This set exploded. It has a loyal backing of collectors that are going to be collecting and putting more money into these cards over the next 10, 12, 20 years. And, I agree with you. I think that a key set is super important for an investment and for, the desirability of a card. And I think 2020 F1 is as much hype as it has. And a lot of people say it's been pumped and whatever. And sure it has. But that's an iconic set that has a lot of loyal collectors behind it. And that set, the demand has outweighed the supply for that set for a long time, a year, 2 years. And that's why the prices of those wax are going up, like constantly.
Yeah. But you say a long time, but 2 years in the hobby is like nothing really. I
view the hobby as such a volatile industry, I think it depends on what you're collecting, but to have something that has continuous, what are F1 I remember buying F1 boxes in the spring of 2021 for like $350 from my local card shop. 2020 F1 Chrome boxes. I think they are between $3,800 and $4,000 right now. And they've been consistently rising for that time period. I think you see swings of like 2 months, 3 months and whatever. To see sustained growth like that for that long is really, really unique, I think. And that's why I say it's like there's vintage cards and, old Babe Ruth, Goody, and, whatever, these types of cards that are Mickey Mantle PSA 9 or 10 that will consistently grow over time. But to have something grow at that kind of rate, that consistently, and hold its value to now where it's still going strong, I think is very unique.
Max, do you have any sets that like modern sets that you can think of off? Like, I know one of them that I was going to ask you about is like that, like first year Sapphire Topps Chrome baseball is something that I know you feel like is a potentially long-term great iconic potential set. Do you have any thoughts about if you have any modern sets that you think will be iconic going forward besides this F1 one?
It's definitely very difficult. I think a good thing to look forward is the firsts or when there was innovation designed into creating a set. For Pokemon, one that immediately comes to mind is 2019 Hidden Fates, which has the big black and red Charizard that is the staple and really what caused the resurgence, even before the Paul brothers got involved, the resurgence of Pokemon card collecting and what gave it this rise of, okay, these cards are rarer than those normally in packs, and there's this huge, massive subset. So Hidden Fates for Pokemon is one that comes to mind. 2016 Top Sapphire Baseball, yes and no, because it is an online exclusive and there are only 250 sets and it is a full factory set. Who knows how many sealed sets are even left in existence? So I guess when looking for these types of releases that are prominent or could be, for lack of a better word, iconic, looking for the firsts aspects, and the innovation is a key aspect.
Yeah, I think also continuity is something that we like to talk about a lot. So knowing with F1 that like Topps has made so much money on F1 Topps Chrome that they will make F1 Topps Chrome now for the next 20 years. There will be a set every year, and knowing that like, oh, in 20 years that'll be the first one.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a big difference in 2020 when Topps is releasing Pierre Gasly and Lewis Hamilton as their first Topps Now cards, and when at the same time, give or take a few weeks, they're releasing Cornhole Topps Now cards. And for me as a spectator to every aspect of that, what made again, as an uncultured United States American, what makes F1 that more prominent than Cornhole? It's just Topps trying to maximize and make the most of its new licenses. Obviously, I'm wrong, and F1 is very cool. I have adopted that view, and I enjoy it. But at that time, maybe I'm a bit cynical, but I was thinking, this is just marketing, and this is just trying to maximize and produce as many licensed cards as possible, and I don't like that.
I would say I disagree with you. I can understand somebody thinking F1's new, but I disagree. I think Topps had no idea that 2020 F1 was going to have the type of demand that it did. That's why there's not that many boxes that are available, and the price of sealed wax is so high. They put no retail product out whatsoever. They got autos from all 20 drivers in like a really high-end set. I mean, I think I really do think that
they lucked into it.
They didn't think that though. And look what they're doing now. They have black ray wave light refractors and these retail exclusive type things and Topps flagship and Topps Chrome and they're adding more and more and more and more. Topps lights out. Topps Chrome, there's no way they were releasing it. What was the starting point? Like 200 something bucks. It was released through Topps. That's like, what is that? 20. That's 20 times less than what it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you guys are kind of saying is like Topps was kind of trying out a lot of different things. They're like, what can we get a license for? What can we put out product for? F1 ended up being, a flash in the pan. Like, oh shit,
and then
this is going to be popular.
And then now they're going oversaturation and just like pumping out as much product. And these years they will, but that's even more of an impetus. I feel like to be bullish on the 2020 F1 set because you're like, that's the set.
I just want to make sure that clarify a little bit. I mean, Cornhole wasn't just being used as a something to make fun of. There were American Cornhole League Topps Now cards in 2020.
We respect Cornhole, but also
there's a Jorge Masvidal card with a print run of 1,173, who I believe is also a UFC fighter. But all of the other cards have a print run under 300, with most being in the 100s.
So Kimball, that set is obviously awesome. Will the first Senna Topps Chrome card, if that ever comes to be, will that be something that you seek after, or is that something that you're now going to see as like more of an oversaturation thing where like Topps is just trying to like keep trying to cash in on each new set?
If you gave me a red, I love red refractors. I collect it in soccer. I collect them in F1. I collect them in I guess just soccer and F1. But if they had a red Senna or a Super Senna, I would buy it at whatever price the auction went to, for sure. I mean, I think I wouldn't be like, depending on the design, maybe I would get golds and check it out and get some more variations if there was some insert, sure. But I think if you had a clean portrait and it was editioned like that, hell yeah, I'd get in there. That's I try to collect everything I can. I don't think that's going to happen. As we spoke about a little bit earlier, I think the licenses of these individual drivers, they're not under some players association like the NBA where they can kind of get everybody in one swoop. It's a little bit more complicated with the old drivers and stuff like that. So, but yes, I mean, I would, why not?
Yeah, for sure. Something that another sport that's pretty similar to F1 in terms of licensing is golf, where like there's not like some golf association as you're seeing with like the live stuff right now. It's like these guys are more or less in control of their own license and can do whatever they want. So with golf, there's like some guys who have quote unquote rookie cards when they're like 70 years old because they just like never were in sets or like just never like saw that. So I think a potential like comparison for F1 going forward is like looking back to like, oh, Jack Nicklaus has RPAs in like 2001. So it's like, are those like, if Senna has an RPA, I guess no, he wouldn't though because he didn't.
I would. I mean, if you look at go look at some of these, flawless, game worn. I mean, let me give you a good example. Look at 2003 exquisite limited logos: Jordan, Magic, Bird, Bill Russell. All those types of guys. An old school guy with a modern card that has anything game worn, race worn, any of that type of stuff with an on-card auto is going to have inherent value there, especially somebody like Senna, whose auto is insanely rare. So there's no such thing as a non-cut auto for that. But
yeah, exactly. Well, we could probably talk for a few hours, I think, Kimball. So I think we should save some of our topics that we were talking about before for a future episode. But Max, is there anything that this conversation is making you think about that you want to get off your chest here?
I am learning a lot today, and also really dissecting into what is marketing and what is genuine fanfare for a person or an individual and wanting to produce a card for it. So diving into that discussion was fruitful today.
Yeah, this was super fun. Kimball, you have anything else you want to say before we go? Like anything important or anything?
Nothing. I mean, thank you so much for having me on. You guys are killing it at this podcast. I hope to be on again maybe someday if I'm on it. But I really appreciate you guys. I love talking about this stuff. I can ramble on for hours, days, as much as you want. So
we definitely feel that. Make sure to, if you are interested in anything that Kimball talked about, make sure to follow him on Instagram at Sunsport Trading Co. Probably one of the cooler Instagram feeds you could find to scroll through and look at some of the cards he has. All the cards that you post are your own cards, right, Kimball?
Yeah, everything. I always say, I put everything in my profile. Anything's available unless I say NFS. I'm open to offers on anything, but anytime I sell something, I take it off. So anything's on there is my current inventory. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have you on again, 100%. So make sure to follow at CardsMax on Twitter and Instagram to hear what sort of nonsense he thinks of in the mornings and starts firing off. And you can follow me at TV Sports Cards. We'll see you guys all next week. Another great episode. Our next guest will have to not be in California, Max, I think.
I am willing to adapt for the sake of having great guests.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kimball, you're definitely a great guest, and we're excited to have you on again.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day, guys.